Here.
Sarah Geisler. Here. Elsa.
Here.
Anderson. Here. Stacy Anderson. Here.
Right. May I have a motion for approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous, thank you. Okay. I'm sorry you can't see the screen audience, but are these on? Can you hear me? I mean, I'll
They're
talk
not on,
up.
but
I can do that.
We can be loud.
You can. Okay, this time on the agenda, is there anyone who, do we have any communication from anyone in the public? Okay.
can you hear me okay?
Come on up here.
Okay.
Would.
I can tell.
Tell us your name and your address.
Sure. My name is Melissa Hoffar. My address is 4324 126th Street in Urbandale. And I have a quick statement here. My name is Melissa Hoffar. I'm here to represent a group of parents and caregivers of students who participate in the extended learning program in the Urbandale Community School District. Our group, which was recently named Advanced U, exists to support the needs of our students and the work of ELP teachers in our district. Our group was established during the 2018 and 2019 school year and has met several times since. Our purpose is to promote opportunities for education, advocacy, networking, volunteering, and support for parents of asynchronous, gifted, and twice exceptional learners within the Urbandale School District. We intend to operate collaboratively with general classroom teachers, ELP teachers, administrators, and other parents in our mission. Our meetings are open for all to attend. As parents and guardians of high-ability children, we know more than anyone that our kids can be a little bit different. They view the world through a slightly different lens, and on a regular basis, often appear to operate just a bit outside the norm. Some of them excelling in a very clearly defined subject area, some of them exhibiting aptitude more broadly across several subjects, and nearly all of them out of sync in some way with the majority of their peers. As parents, we are also aware of the many myths that surround so-called gifted children, and to be honest, many of us don't really like the word gifted either, as it seems to promote a complete misconception that children who are developing with a degree of asynchrony that they themselves cannot help are somehow better, when they simply have different needs than their peers. Many of us live with the myth that we as parents are driving our children to advancement, that we are drilling them with flashcards or pushing them like tiger moms to get a special label or to be the best. The truth is that most of us are trying to navigate a myriad of issues and unexpected demands that come with raising a neurologically atypical child. Their emotional intensities, their exhausting rage to learn, their intellectual abilities that do not and cannot match up to their simultaneous physical and emotional abilities, and their frequent desire to try to color outside the lines. And of course, we hear the myth that because our children have a specific talent or high aptitude in one or more areas, our children will automatically do well without any sort of intervention. And if that myth were true, if we really truly felt as a community that children with natural talents do not need to be challenged, we would not invest as a district in competitive sports. But we do because we as a community recognize that activities that challenge a child's natural talents will sharpen their skills, deepen their commitment to their learning and to their school, and strengthen their character, in addition to harnessing opportunity and furthering their potential. The truth is, if left unserved in the classroom, our kids often languish in boredom, with some even losing their interest in learning or exhibiting destructive behaviors. Contrary to the assumptions many people make, gifted children may not be model students with classic versions of so-called teachers' pets. While raising high-ability children does come with many moments of unique and unexpected joy, we are very aware that our children often represent a challenge to their classroom teachers. They can make daily life difficult for their teachers, who face challenges to differentiate on many different levels. Because teachers may not have the time or resources available to differentiate as needed, gifted children may not receive the level of assistance they require. Leaving high-ability children to navigate their academic course on their own really does no one any favors. Luckily, we live in Iowa, one of the few states in the nation that not only recognizes gifted and talented students and mandates, but also sets aside at least some funding for those programs. We know that as defined in the Iowa Administrative Code, Section 281, Chapter 59, gifted and talented children are defined as those students distinguished from the total K-12 student population who are identified as possessing outstanding ability and who are capable of high performance. Gifted and talented children are children who require appropriate instruction and educational services commensurate with their abilities and needs beyond those provided by the regular school program. Gifted and talented children include those children with demonstrated achievement or potential ability, or both, in any of the following areas or in combination: general intellectual ability, creative thinking, leadership ability, visual and performing arts ability, or specific ability aptitude. And chapter 59 also describes development of curriculum and instructional strategies, saying the program of instruction shall consist of content and teaching strategies that reflect the accelerated pace, intellectual processes, and creative abilities that characterize gifted and talented students. We also know, to use words from the National Association for Gifted Children, or NAGC, that giftedness knows no boundaries. Giftedness occurs across all cultures, races, and socioeconomic backgrounds. Here in Urbandale, that mindset, combined with the diversity that is so uniquely Urbandale, along with UCSD's motto of teaching all, reaching all, provides tremendous opportunity. We have gifted students who may also be English language learners, or who may also require support for learning disabilities, such as dyslexia or autism. We currently have many gifted students in temporarily crowded classrooms, both their general classroom and their ELP classroom, which at Jensen is essentially a divided portion of a hallway. Many gifted learners do not always demonstrate the behaviors of a teacher's ideal student, making them hard to recognize because teachers receive very little training in what giftedness truly looks like. For example, these students may not visibly pay attention in class. Their desks and personal appearances and habits may look messy as they struggle with executive functioning. They may openly question their teachers, and some might display their frustration with boredom and feeling overlooked in negative ways because they might not yet possess the skills to express those feelings in healthy ways. The district's ELP teachers are trained in identifying potential abilities in high performance, and they need to be encouraged, supported, and included in all efforts to broaden existing boundaries and future horizons for these students. We ask the school board to be aware and supportive of the fact that public education in Iowa requires support for gifted students in all grades, K-12, as the law does not limit services only to those identified in the standardized tests that start in third grade. As the district juggles multiple priorities and begins a significant shift with the opening of the new Olmsted Elementary in 2021 and the construction of Valerius in the years following, we also ask that the board remembers this portion of the student population and considers questions like these. Are ELP teachers receiving what they need to meet the varying needs of our district's high-ability students in the best ways possible? What can be done to ensure all teachers, classroom and ELP, are receiving the training, support, and resources they need in this particular area? Are we doing everything we can in Urbandale to identify all qualifying students in all grades from all backgrounds? Do identified students feel well served? Are they receiving, in the words of the law, services commensurate with their abilities and needs? How can we check in with the kids to ensure their individual needs are being met? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming, talking with us. Thank you. Our next meeting, we will be discussing the at-risk meeting summary, and I assume some changes in the programming, but that is not for tonight. So we'll skip to number 5, which is facilities update.
Start with Bill on
Bill, go first.
I'll go first.
So I'm Bill Harder with Stall Construction. So this will be the update for UES number 1, Olmsted building. Jensen Builders, a concrete contractor. He finished Area A, the Northwest Academic area last week. And he's moved on to Area C. He's about halfway around the gym right now. Doing pretty good. So he'll work that area and then up the east side, kind of right by where our trailer is, and tie back in on the Forrest and Associate, who is the mason on the project. He's got a little bit more work in Area B, where his shelter's still up on that tall wall. And then they dropped down and started laying storm shelter walls in Area A, Northwest addition. So he's moving along. That Area D work, he just has one little section to run up and need more room for his mason, so he's gonna drop 2 guys back there and try to finish that up this week. Cattleman Steel, who's a steel supplier, delivered partial load of structural steel, bar joists and deck for Area B, which is over your admin office area and kind of your furniture. And then we had to kind of slow it down because it's burying us in steel every little bit, so. Woodruff Construction, who's erecting the steel, they're continue on Area D, that southwest area. And he's dropped back and started putting down decking and edge angles and that, and doing his details and works out. He probably has a couple more weeks in that area to be 100% complete, and we'll get a framer started over in that area. Baymont Electric's on site. Essentially, he's working with the mason, putting in conduits, boxes as the walls are coming up. And LA Fulton is on site as needed, putting in sleeves for masonry walls and doing some of the plumbing work that he can get to. This next push, we're really getting back to pushing to get utility work done and finish up storm sewer and that. Hopefully this month, as long as the weather tracks a little bit for us. And so them, and then the framer kind of this next month will be the 2. Sandstone's been there before, but he'll be back, and then we'll be metal stud framing going on Area D and start framing in the walls. And then just one other thing, so there's a schedule that went out today, and essentially it mimics the other one, but if you want to look at it, it has the breakdown of continuity of everything and finishes and through basically individual rooms. It's kind of the way we use. As we get into those parts of the building, we're actually getting into paint carpet. So now it'll flow all the way through all of this. So obviously something we use with those contractors to help move them forward, and it's a nice check off to see how we're going as we go. So might be a little confusing because if you open it all up, it's long and big and a little confusing. Any questions for me?
That's good. It's
Yeah,
exciting.
now we just need weather.
Yeah.
So we have yesterday's weather.
We'll do our best.
Thanks.
So the next item on the agenda, right? The weather.
Yeah.
What's the business? John Lease is, ill. John Lease is ill, so updating on the high school construction. HVAC system is at a standstill right now as we wait for these winter sports to complete. As far as the fitness center, 95% of the drywall work is in place. Ceilings have all been painted. The block work, they've had to do some additional block work in there to get it up to par. That's all been completed, and the first coat of paint has been placed on the walls. They're beginning to hang the lights just today. They continue to do the HVAC in the fitness center. We'll see quite a bit of it is actually installed. Starting tomorrow, the tile will start doing some tile work, and the polishing of the concrete will start as early as next week. So there's and the metal siding, of course, you notice on the outside is still going up as well, trying to get that to match. So it's coming. Walk through there, it's not near as messy as it once was, and which is a good thing because it's created a lot of dust in the school at times, and that's probably been one of our biggest challenges, trying to keep the dust out.
Good.
Progress.
Okay. We'll move into action items. We have a location change from the posted board meeting for March 9th.
Move to approve the change in location on March 9th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Which, by the way, will be at the AL rather than Jensen. Just make sure you write that down.
We'll get that posted as early as tomorrow.
So we have our first reading for a number of 900 policies, which at this point, if everyone's okay, we can kind of skip through each of the separately listed ones that have changes. Do you have any clarifications?
The ones that have changes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There was, well, can I also talk about ones that I was hoping that we weren't going to change, but we could?
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that.
Do you all want to go through them individually on the changes and talk about it that way, or?
I don't think you need to do all of them.
Okay.
So we're thorough, why don't you just go through the numbers
All right,
and click them off, that way we
okay.
are all on the
let's,
same page.
yep, let's go with the 900 unchanged, Ashley.
For numbers 906, 912, and 924, they feature his/her language that I would like us to change to the singular there.
906.
912 and 924.
I would be supportive of that change happening. Because again, we were told that that language did not exist within our policies. So I'd like to make sure we're being thorough. And so it's a good time to examine all of our policies, really, since we were told, nope, no problems. And they can easily do that with just a location finder on Adobe.
Well, not only that, but I know in other policies, we have used singular there, so I just would rather all of our policies have the same matching language.
Okay.
Yeah,
In case of
cohesiveness.
So we can kind of be efficient. Let's go through all of these, and unless we pull one out, then we can okay them, all the suggestions at the same time. So let's go with 901, which doesn't actually call for changes. Well, does it?
I don't see any revision
No.
changes.
Except for an update in the date of revision of looking it over.
Historically, what we've done, if you look at the front pages, we don't make changes to every individual one unless there was changes to that policy. Otherwise, those dates will not change. It's at the front of the policy series.
Okay, and we'll skip to number 911 with the change in red. Any questions or clarifications on this one?
I don't know if I'm the only one that's reading the actual changes where it gets a little squiffy at the bottom. Are we changing most of the things a little bit clearer?
As you brought that to my attention, to me, I think what we need to do is after the word facility, in order to ensure the continued use of any school facility, we put a comma and then a lowercase t, because it is one complete sentence. The district makes it. So I think that would fix that.
Yes, sorry.
All right.
Appreciate it bringing that to the attention.
No, that's why we're going through the. Right, got 915. Disposal of school sites and buildings. This program doesn't exist anymore, but I assume it was updated following the dropping of that student constructed housing.
I have to go from memory. I'm not sure. This was just a new one that ISB came up with, so in order to stay.
And in our case, it's probably largely irrelevant, but I understand including it just in case that were ever reestablished. Okay, 916, smoke and tobacco-free policy. Apparently had not originally involved students. Probably a good ad.
Probably.
Okay. All right. Given some of our experiences over the past year, a change in the naming of district facilities and events to set sort of a recommendation for how to proceed. So does anyone have any questions on that, the wording or procedure? $9.25.
I like the question marks. What's the contemplation there?
So basically, make a long story short, I had a misinterpretation. So I was thinking that every time we had a field change order for the new building at 5,000, I was reading it backwards because basically the new school is a competitive big project over 500,000. So basically Catherine had me call today and go, Danielle, so we're going to leave it at the 5,000 mark, the lowest mark, because really the field orders can go up to 25,000. I was just worried on a $30 million building. It was highly likely she would be visiting often.
Well, not whoever.
Yeah. So it's just my misinterpretation was the biggest thing on that. So
So we will drop the question marks.
the 5,000.
926, District Emergency Operation Plan, which, as I understand it, is continually being revised.
We actually have an emergency plan, but this is a little bit different, so I wasn't sure. ISB, it's a mandatory policy. Of course, I left that note in there, but that note will come out. I just want to make sure the board understood that this was mandatory. So it's a little bit different. When it talks about the last paragraph, the drills that we hold, basically that is all drills because now they are state and federally mandated. We have to have 2 storm, tornado, and 2 fire per semester. By state law, we have to have 1 lockdown, and we do 2 a semester. And we've done that since last year. We've kind of been a little bit ahead of the curve there. This policy is 100% new from ISB.
What, I don't know how much can be said out loud to safety, but what do the lockdowns kind of consist of?
For the most part, locking the doors, of course, getting into a safe portion of the room, turning the lights off, again, getting out of view.
Okay.
We started, not last year, but the year before, we did our very first one, is what we call the soft lockdown. We don't use the term active shooter ever. With that, it's just, we may have to go in a safe place because there's lots of reasons where we do a lockdown.
Have we been checking in with teachers to see the response from the children on that?
I guess the principals, I sure have. Nobody has given any feedback. So again, we've been doing it for 2 years.
Can we reach out to the principals and get some feedback from them in regards to how the children are handling them and how the teachers are feeling about them? Thank you.
Okay, last one. That was it, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay, I have a motion to approve with the suggested changes.
I move to approve the suggested changes on the 9 policy.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that's unanimous. Okay. Now we'll skip to C. We've got a few. One.
Basically, as we move to having only the board sign policies, the recommendation was ours was just totally scrap the 31 that we gave approval for various things, and we're scrapping it. That's the recommendation.
So I would actually like to dig a little deeper and look at our business procedures. And the reason why is we met at UHS on a board meeting December 9th of 2019. And at that point, there was a $10,000 check cut. I think the board was surprised to see. And I said, I was surprised to see that admin had the authority to spend $25,000 on marketing and rebranding without it ever coming before the board or having the board know anything about it. So I think that's my question. How did that happen? And is something we can expect? Is that commonplace? Judy then said, Mary Beth, what does state code say about it? And Mary Beth responded and said, I'd like to go out to our school website and show you our business procedures slideshow. And she proceeded to give us a little bit of a demonstration. And I said, okay, so the board voted to make it that way, to have the authority to be in compliance with Iowa code, because we did not have an authority level that was in compliance with Iowa code. Mary Beth said, right, we were actually below what Iowa code had. So we were outdated and wanted to bring us up to speed. After some discussion, and some of it was inaudible to do the logistics, Steve goes on to say lots of things, including there are lots of things the board doesn't see. He couldn't possibly show us all the contracts he signs. Can I get an explanation for this? And this occurs at 1 hour, 2 minutes, and 35 seconds into the audio. Can I please get an explanation?
Part of what these changes are addressing that. Okay, so particularly 831, as we had this policy for a long time. I think it was adopted in 2013 or 14. I'm not going to open it. I don't know.
Yes,
10.
2010.
Oh, 2010, okay. And based on a conversation with our school attorneys, this was a rather common attempt to not overwhelm volunteers like us to have to sign those kind of contracts. It was acceptable at the time, given some of the issues in local schools and the vulnerability to legal issues. Most districts have stepped that back. And it does involve more paperwork for us. But you can fully expect that going forward, you will have a copy of every contract that we sign.
So before it was stated that could not possibly happen, it has become possible.
It will be standard practice, which is part of why this policy's gone away, and we've been looking at some of the others in conference with others.
Is there
Basically
anything,
Danielle and Christy.
is there anything that prompted this particular conversation?
Well, our conversation about going to it is totally wrong. Because again, all these policies have already been approved by ours. So again, it was kind of a shock for us to say, hey, how come I have the authority to approve it? The issue where we were having it, where it was the issue was, I have the authority to approve it, but I don't sign it. And that was the thing. So one of the questions was, does the superintendent have the authority to an agreement versus a contract? And they're not up there one and the same. Ours stated, if I may go on, stated that they were the first ones to write the policy when Des Moines had a construction. And again, every district has this issue, and it's misunderstood about the idea, do you have the authority? Just because you have the authority to approve doesn't mean you have the authority to write. So that's where clarification came. So again, we've got to get everyone in the practice, and that's what we're trying to do. I think last meeting you had asked why there were some signature contracts there. That's why we're attempting to ensure that.
So we'll be reviewing our business procedure slideshow that's out on the website, and those sort of things we were directed to as financial chains of command. Those things will be amended. Would that be appropriate?
If they don't follow our policy, I would fully expect them to be revised. And so, there was, as we delved into these, there were contradictions in the policies. And in one, because they were adopted at different times and not necessarily investigated thoroughly. And the other real issue is, in the climate today, and the scrutiny, particularly in public institutions, we are better off being conservative, and that's what we're choosing to do. So now everybody clearly understands it's laid out, and that's kind of what you can expect. And unfortunately, it will be a longer packet going on, but that's how it is. So is that okay? Do I have a motion to wipe out 831?
Move to remove policy 831 in its entirety. Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're going to have every child succeeds.
Every student succeeds.
Every student succeeds.
ESSA, formerly known as MCLB,
And that-
but all stemming from the ESEA. So some of the acronyms.
So we requested that Krista just give us a brief overview, because we've got a couple new people, although you probably know way more than we do, but
It's for me.
it's
all for me.
no, it's for me too. And so we're just we're very proud that our district doesn't have, well, every school is at a level that is more than acceptable. But I thought it would be good to just review this a little bit. So, and I'm sorry you guys won't be able to see it unless you can access our.
If you do have an electronic device with you, it is in the board packet under ESSA overview, and I'm looking specifically at the ESSA update 22420, which is the PDF of the PowerPoint slide. So I will briefly explain the other 4 attachments that are in there. Some are lengthier than others. So ESSA was signed into law actually under President Obama. It was one of the last things he did as president. And unlike No Child Left Behind, which really took a lot of local aspects of education and made them more federal, ESSA relinquished a lot of that control back to states. And so states were tasked with writing their own ESSA plan. The state of Iowa did that. At the same time, we had some things going on with our state assessments, as you might recall. So I really give credit to those at the State Department for working through a few rounds of revisions as we worked to identify what that state assessment was. So the first year, pardon me, that the ESSA designations came out was actually last year, and it was about school year 2017-18. So the information about our designations is actually for last school year, 2018-19, though those designations didn't actually come out until January of 2020. So we're about 6 months behind as we're working on getting all the pieces and parts moving. So that's why this says 2018-19 school year, because it's actually those data that this is based on. So in brief, as I mentioned, it does give states back some control, and here are the things that states needed to do. They had to set long-term goals in reading and math for proficiency, and that's what we use. Our Iowa statewide assessment of student progress, the ISAS, is used to measure that. We also have goals for graduation rates and also then progress toward meeting English language proficiency requirements for our English learners. The law itself identifies public schools every 3 years that fall within the lowest 5%, statewide, 5th percentile. And so once a school is identified as comprehensive, it's on that list for 3 years, and no new schools come on the comprehensive list until that 3-year period is up. So no new comprehensive schools were identified this year. And I'll explain what that means in terms of the total points. It also identifies the lowest 5% or lowest, the targeted schools with student subgroups that don't meet that target. And currently that target is 43.95. And again, I'll explain in just a moment what that means. So you can be identified as comprehensive, which means overall you don't meet that performance, or you can meet the target overall, but a certain subgroup or subgroups may not meet that target. And that would be the targeted schools. Again, once you're targeted, you're targeted for multiple years, but those schools can be identified each and every year. And there was a table in the board packet last time that showed the number of schools that were identified by district, metro district for last year and this year. Another change from No Child Left Behind is identification is by school, not by district. So we used to have the schools in need of assistance, but also then districts in need of assistance. This is only by school, so districts are not identified. Comprehensive schools, again, are the lowest 5% of all schools across the state in total accountability measures, or their graduation rate is below 66%. Targeted schools, again, one or more subgroups, perform as low as that lowest 5%, and that score is 43.95 currently. And then I listed the subgroups that are measured also on that slide. So things like students who are eligible for free or reduced price lunch is considered a subgroup, English learners, students with disabilities, and then various racial groups are also considered subgroups. The total number of students in any of these groups in a particular school must be greater than 20 for accountability. And the reason for that is to protect individual students' identities. Once we get subgroup numbers lower than 20, sometimes those data can be too easily identified and traced back to a particular student or students. So for accountability purposes, a subgroup must meet that minimum number. That's what that N is greater than 20 per school must mean or means. So once you're on the list, you get off the list. There's multiple supports and collaboration that are provided from area education agencies, from the state to the school. And schools can exit that status when they've demonstrated consistent improvement, at least 3 years of improvement, and are no longer, if they're comprehensive, among the bottom 5% in the state. I've included a link to the Iowa School Performance Profiles, but I've also included some screenshots that I'd like to take you through briefly. This link is public and open to anyone, and you can view any school in the entire state. There's a feature in here that also lets you compare schools to one another. They've added some really cool advanced features this year that let us dive into our data in a way we've never been able to dive into it before, so that's pretty exciting. But as you can imagine, it's a pretty cumbersome system to build. So we just received this information in January for the update, and that's where those designations came in. So one of the questions that was asked about ESSA is, what are the different things we're measuring? And so on slide 6, What you see are all of the different accountability measures. Those are called learning measures. And anything on the left side of that table is actually used in the calculation of our ESSA Accountability Index. On the right side, these are things that in the state of Iowa, we are measuring, we are analyzing, we are looking at, but they are not included in the calculations for that ESSA designation. The reason for that is because a year or two prior to ESSA, the state actually passed a law requiring the Department of Education to create the Iowa School Report Card, I think is what it was called. And so this is an attempt by the state to include all of this information in one place for ease of access and ease, transparency and all of that. But that's what that means when it says additional metrics. They're not included in the ESSA calculations, but they are things that we feel are important within the state of Iowa and that we're tracking. So most of the things that are on that left side are fairly self-explanatory. So our participation rate in our state assessments, of course, is just how many students are taking it. I'm very proud to say that our counselors, our testing coordinators at the building work their tails off to make sure that we're usually around 99% of students taking an assessment. And every given year we have medical issues or whatnot that, we have to excuse a couple of kiddos, but we're very, very high on that. Conditions for learning was a new metric last year that is a student survey. I will say we learned late this fall that the survey was deemed not valid and reliable for students in grades 3 through 5 last year. So there's some work being done to make sure that it's valid and reliable when we administer it again this spring. We look at both a 4 and 5 year graduation rate, as well as then the biggest metric is that student growth. For this year, last year, 2018-19, because we transitioned to a new state assessment, growth was compared using reading on the Iowa assessments to only the reading portion of the ISASS. This next year, we will compare it to the full ELA, English Language Arts complement, which is the reading and the writing components. But for last year's purposes, those statistics, I'm not going to lie, are completely over my head. But I'd be happy to do some more digging if you'd like me to try to find out and explain those to you how they did that. But there was statistical calculations that were used to determine that. Of course, just flat academic achievement, whether or not students are proficient, not yet proficient, or exceeding. And then there's a new post-secondary readiness indicator, which is a combination of all of those 4 sub-bullet points listed there. And then finally, the progress toward achieving that English Language Arts composite. Are there any questions about any of those metrics? Okay. On the next page, next slide, slide 7, this shows the reporting metrics only. So the metrics that are on the left side of that table in the previous screen are included in this particular screenshot. What you see is the overall weighting for elementary schools and high schools. And this is transparent on the Iowa School Performance Profiles. You can actually see what these numbers are for not only the Urbandale schools, but any schools. But it shows you how those metrics combine to come up with that overall score. So earlier I mentioned that 43.95 was kind of the magic cut score, if you will, for schools to be identified as comprehensive, needing comprehensive support, or for subgroups that are in need of comprehensive support. So if all of these different metrics add up to a total number of 43.95, well, I should say greater than 43.95, then that means a school is not identified as a comprehensive school. And then again, if all of the subgroups line up at that same number, then that means you're not identified as targeted. So this slide is just intended to show kind of the combination of metrics and how they vary in weighting for those different years. Because obviously at elementary and middle, we don't have a post-secondary readiness index or a graduation rate. So it just shows how those break down. On slide 8, it shows you our overall numbers, the overall score. So if you think about the calculations in slide 7, this shows how that all shook out in both 2017-18 and 2018-19. So really, again, if you keep in mind that number of 43.95 to give you just some reference, a frame of reference, you can see how we're performing in relation to that comprehensive designation. The Words, so the number is ESSA. The words are more Iowa State report card language. So commendable, high performing, acceptable, etc. Those were, those descriptors were generated initially with the Iowa State report card. Some resources that you will find in your agenda item include an ESSA fact sheet, and that was put out by the state of Iowa. I thought it was a nice kind of one-pager to give you just an overview, but that is on the Department of Ed's website. ESSA Common Questions is also a resource put out by the state of Iowa that's on the Department of Education's website. Again, just thought it was helpful. And then 2 guides for the Iowa State Performance Profile, so ISPP. The first one is probably a little bit more user-friendly. It's the user guide, and it does a far more thorough job than I'm doing now of explaining just what those school performance profiles are, how to read them, how to navigate them, that type of thing. The technical guide is what we are diving into really as a district, as leaders in the district, to work with our teacher leaders, just to help us understand all of those numbers that you see on page 8 or on slide 8. So there's detailed information in there about all of our schools. And we just want to do a really thorough job of understanding how all of those calculations are figured. We want to make sure we understand all of the different subgroups and how those are shaking out. So that technical guide is there, and feel free to read it. It's really the detailed information about all those statistical calculations that went into that score. I did have a question that was posed prior to the meeting that Brianna sent to me about the SAMI, the Self-Assessment of MTSS Implementation. The SAMI is a process that comprehensive schools are required to go through to help them assess their level of implementation of MTSS, which is that multi-tiered system of support in the areas of reading, math, and behavior. We actually in 2016-17 and then 2017-18 engaged with Heartland AEA, our regional director at the time, as well as some of our content support specialists, to put lead all of our administrators and instructional coaches and teacher leader representatives through what I think became, from what I can tell, was kind of the precursor to some of the SAMI work. So the leadership consensus building, for example, with staff, surveying staff and gathering consensus for supporting students in the MTSS, in all tiers of MTSS. We then led all of our K-8 teams through a second level of intervention training and work around tier 2 interventions, tier 1 and 2 interventions in the area of literacy. Since that time, what we've been doing is starting to implement that same work in math and behavior. Though I won't say that, like if you look through the SAMI rubric, we are not fully implemented in any building that I'm aware of in all areas, reading, math, and behavior. That's work that's ongoing. So the processes that we're using to identify areas for improvement, identify areas we need to go next, include our strategic improvement planning processes, so our 45 and 60-day reviews, as well as our data days where we dive in with PLC teams at a deeper level. And I'd be happy to entertain either follow-up questions from that or additional questions from
ask.
any of you.
Because the SAMI is also part of that continuous improvement.
Yep.
It's highly recommended that buildings still engage in the work.
Sure.
So although you're not designated with
Right.
targeted or comprehensive. And the purpose of that, SAMI, is to really drill down to what action planning steps do you need. So I'm hearing the strategic plan, which makes a lot of sense, but with the addition of mathematics and socioemotional health, you know, I firmly believe that it's a really good time for every building to engage in that work and take assessment of where they are in that MTSS system and where are there areas that need more support.
Sure.
I think as a board member, that would be a lot of great information and data that I would like to see, well, if we have Webster is high performing, what are they doing then that maybe we could give some supports to Jensen that's you know, not as high performing as Webster, something like that. I think that SAMI work is so important, and there's additional resources, so you can even access Heartland AEA for ESSA supports, even to go through that technical guide, so that you don't have to have a targeted or comprehensive designation to still access supports available. So I think that that would be something as a board member, I would like to see further conversations in the
Okay.
district about how they can continue to, use that SAMI as their continual improvement process.
Yeah, I think what we would want to do is just make sure we crosswalk it with some of the processes we have in place. So we're making sure we're not redundant, but yeah, no, I mean, it's an incredibly thorough document with lots of support. I know when we went through the initial trainings with our Heartland ADA staff, it was amazing. I mean, truly, they did an amazing job of helping us with that work.
And with the newer online SAMI system, it collects that data for you, it aggregates it all, so you can really see where those action steps need to be taken. And as a building leadership team, then those decisions can help with that strategic plan that you have in place. I have one other question.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm looking at the conditions for learning.
Sure.
And especially in our secondary schools.
Yep.
And what I'm seeing in both 2018 and 19 is that, well, our middle school is below. And
State average.
State average,
Yep.
right, exactly. And our high school has been below both years.
Right.
So, UMS was above in 18 and now is below.
Mhm.
So when I think about conditions of learning, that's obviously serving our
Safety,
students,
well-being,
safety and well-being.
Mhm.
So I'm just kind of looking at that particular set of data to see what, again, do we need to be looking at with social emotional health for the safety of our students, especially in secondary when we look at the conditions for learning, and if you have any thoughts or what's,
I have some generic thoughts, but I'd be happy to reach out to both the middle and high school principal. I mean, I'm pretty intimately aware of what they're doing, but I think they would be in the best position to explain all the intricacies of what they're doing. So the conditions for learning, if you look at our student engagement data over the past several years, they triangulate really well. Our conditions for learning and our student engagement data are telling us the same story, and that is, safety, well-being, social emotional health, all of those things, particularly at the secondary levels, start to really drop off. So I know, like at the middle school, for example, they're engaging in different work with students around, I'm drawing a blank on what it's called. Their
restorative practice.
No, it's their I'm drawing a blank on what it's called. It's built off the Building a Better You, but it's basically what it means to be a good student, behaviorally, emotionally, that type of thing, social emotionally at the middle school. So student focus groups, they've engaged different teacher focus groups around coming up with processes for improvement, as well as just an overall, the All Learning is Social Emotional book study that their leadership team is leading their team through. At the high school, they've engaged with Jen Yuli Wells through Please Pass the Love. They've brought her in several times as, again, to complement their work and their book study that they're doing with the All Learning is Social Emotional. But again, I'd be happy to reach out to both of those individuals and invite them. Next month, I believe March 9th will be the board meeting. It might be the one after that, I don't remember. We will be providing a pretty comprehensive update on all of that social emotional learning work. So it could be done in conjunction with that or after that as well if you have questions. Yeah. And I will say, the way that those data are presented back to us allow us to dig in a little bit more, just the way they're lumped together, which has been pretty helpful too. Other questions that I can answer? Okay, well, feel free to reach out anytime if something comes up.
Thank you.
Think I've
Very nice
answered.
overview. Appreciate it.
Sure.
So,
Open the consent agenda.
do we have any things that we would like to discuss within the consent agenda? Are there any items that you'd like clarification on or discussion? I'm going to suggest that maybe we pull out the extended leave of absence request for a separate discussion.
That's fine.
Okay. So do we have any clarifications on any of the other items? Yeah, except
So
for,
are you making a motion to do that, or?
I would like someone to.
Yes, I'll make the motion to do that, to help you out there. Let's exclude, what is it, B, little I,
Mhm.
from the consent agenda, and I'll move to approve from there.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. So let's open, if you have any questions or further clarifications or discussion of BI separately, does anyone have any things that they'd like to bring forward?
I have a question, but I don't know if it's because I wasn't.
We're all friends.
Well, because I wasn't here for the vote last time, I was wondering where it, am I calling something loud here?
Why don't you start with the discussion among the board first?
Okay, well, it was a very specific question because I wasn't here last time, so I was wondering, we got notice of where the UEA stood this time, but I was wondering where they stood last time.
They did not vote fine.
Okay.
At the last time, I guess I can take this. We were presented with the recommendation from the administration. I think they were reading it consistent with the feel the need to reach out. It was a more broad conversation. Since then, when it was made public, it kind of went beyond that. We obviously received a lot more contact about it since.
And then I just had the hardest time trying to figure out which way I personally was going to vote on this one. So as for setting the precedent, I mean, are we genuinely worried that that many people are going to ask to do the same?
I think the challenge is it's not a matter of how many, it's does it open it up for anyone to do it?
Well, I mean, it's not
The answer is
changing,
yes.
but it's not changing the way we currently have our.
It is changing it because 2 years is not addressed in a contract or agreement, whether it's teacher or district, because there is no such thing as a 2-year leave.
So if we don't change the language in our policy,
And we won't change it, so to be clear.
Yeah,
there
yeah.
is nothing.
but if there's nothing and we make a vote for exception, I mean, that doesn't necessarily tie us into making the same vote for exception later, does it? I just want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding anything or.
Well, naturally, every situation could be different, but because there is no guidelines or policy for this, it will be wide open that anyone can apply.
And I think at that point, it comes before us, we're making individual determinations,
Right.
and that's fine, but you're also opening it up to, the way I see it, as, potential liability, for lack of a better word, because you made a decision for this, but now you're not making it similar, what we see it in the same vein, even if we see it as a
Yeah.
different light.
I agree with Mark in the sense that as our responsibility for the district and as guardians of the district's money, we need to reduce exposure to liability. And I see the same liability that Mark's speaking of.
Which I recognize a struggle. I get
Yeah.
you. I mean, you're dealing with somebody, with an individual request and a career that they've had with the high school, wonderful program, but I think we need to look at it.
The bigger issue that I've been having is that one of my core values, just as myself as a person, is that if someone's seeking higher education for any purpose, I want to support that. And like this breaks against that a little bit, and that's why it's not so much anything else. It's literally just my personal value is that I want everyone to seek higher education whenever they possibly can, because the smarter the population is, the better we all are. But this breaks a little.
And I've really spoken my piece, other than I want to jump off of the statement you said, Mark, is to me, you have to make a decision that is faceless and nameless. Because this person is a high achiever, and we all know it and all respect it, but not everyone may be in that category. And again, you have to worry about the liability of the precedents that you set. And again, just to confirm, this is not Steve Bass superintendent recommendation. This is your attorney's recommendation that I just happen to agree with.
Do we have any other policies in place if we do have a teacher that wants to seek further education, but they need to do it in a way that does interfere with their day-to-day work, but it's just for a shorter amount? Like, that's not very clear, I'm sorry, but.
I mean, we have people naturally, lots of people every year who want to continue yet.
But I mean,
So
like,
I'm not sure how you would
if
address
they can't, if do they need to take 6 months off because they have a very, like, one specific class where they have to? Do we have a policy in place for that?
I guess I'm not aware of any for that because again, there are many, many leaves that are written
Oh,
in Iowa code.
Yeah.
I don't know if many districts or any would have something like that, but I can't answer for other districts. Everybody's had to, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of educators have had to take classes in weekends or nights or,
I was just gonna say 99.9%
Yeah.
of the education population that has probably furthered their education has done it on their own time. And at night and weekends, because they're an educator and they want continuous learning opportunities and they want to future their career in education. So I think that this is a very unique circumstance. But I do think that we need to consider that for, future asks that may come of us.
I guess my big thought process there, like, I understand that the majority of the folks do that, but are we making it, is there an avenue to make it easier on all of the educators to not have to take on that level of workload where they not only have a full-time job plus all the extra stuff that comes along with being a teacher plus trying to get further education? Do we have anything in place that helps them to do that?
in the old days, there was what you call phase 2 money, and then there was money available for them to help you, but there's nothing like that. We have over 50% of our teachers in the district that have master's or higher degrees.
It's not an ideal situation.
No,
But I think in this, there's no easy win here. And so I think you kind of got to think about the integrity of the system and the students first, and divorce the personality or whomever out of it and make the best decision that we can. We are also guided by an agreement that the district has entered into, the master contract with the teachers, which because of the state mandates, they didn't have to do. But there is some integrity to be maintained there too, so that everyone knows where they are, and we try to follow it with consistency and fairness. And so that's kind of where I come down. The last time, as I said, I abstained because of my friendship with this individual, but I also think, so I'm very torn. But I think we have to consider the entire system, and the big focus is on the students and the staff and maintaining the integrity for the best of both of them.
Yep. Kind of in light of that discussion, I would move to approve the administration recommendation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Did you vote? Great discussion. Thank you for your thoughts and your emotional effort. This is not an easy position that we have been in. So, let's see. Does anyone have any proposals? This is just a discussion. Our either next or the next meeting will be the discussion, possibly continuing what you were talking about, kind of a roundtable discussion. The items that we came up with in our plan are kind of broad. I kind of like people's feelings about what we could focus on for the first one. Keep in mind, it would probably be about an hour. And it's an exchange of information, similar to what we were talking about with social emotional learning, perhaps at the middle school and the high school. So if we could find something like that where we could have a common discussion. As you remember, we agreed that that's what we would like to do at the last workshop. So does anyone have any input on that? Then I'm going to suggest we go with exactly what came up. And, what the social emotional learning is, a little bit more of elucidation on maybe what's going on in the different buildings, and maybe more importantly, what they're envisioning, and most importantly, how the board could help them with that.
And I think focusing on the curriculum and instruction for the students The comprehensive plan that we received kind of really outlined a lot of the adult learning that was going on. And I would really like to have more of a discussion on what are the children learning with those social emotional skills.
Do you want to invite specific leaders from the various buildings who are leading more of that work with their teachers on an ongoing basis to be present? Or?
Yes,
That would be,
yeah, and that was the intent, was an exchange with what's going on the ground. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. So I think it's the next meeting that we kind of agreed, but please let me check on that.
Okay.
And some other events, we may have to shuffle some things. It's just meant to be a discussion, kind of on the ground discussion.
Okay, yeah, just let us know for sure, and we'll make sure.
Yeah, and I don't know, you're gonna have to, maybe you guys should talk about whether it would work to cut the secondary and the elementary. I don't know. I don't know whether that's too big a bite.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we don't want it to be useful for everyone, a good exchange, but not.
That might not be a bad idea. The split.
Mhm.
So you're around the two.
Okay. That's decided. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
One quick note
Mhm.
though, starting the next meeting, we'll be starting the celebration, so the principals have signed up through the remainder of this year. And they'll have a 5-minute presentation with themselves, could bring kids, could bring teachers, just share the good things that are happening in their school.
Yeah, I'm thrilled that we're going to be doing that for the rest of the year. That's
Really
awesome.
looking forward to it.
Yep, more kids here, more students here, the better. The other thing that I want to bring up is that we are going to have a meeting Thursday evening, 5:30, which will need to be added to the assembly. Close personnel.
I'll move to adjourn.
a second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Very nice, productive meeting. Thank you, guys.